Welcome to Mindful of Everything, Vivi. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Hi, Agrita. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm very happy to be here and talk to you about the discussion of spirituality and my own journey, healing journey. I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. This topic, this intersection of science and philosophy and spirituality is something that we have yet to explore on the podcast. So I really believe that this conversation will hold opportunity for us to explore that further. And I think it would be great if we could start the episode by asking you how you began to re engineer yourself to become the person you are today. Re-engineer is a term you use in your book, which we will talk about later in the episode. So, yeah, it would be really insightful if you could start the episode off in that way.
Yes, so I use the term re-engineering in my book because my background is engineering. I had a bachelor degree in chemical engineering and a master degree in bioengineering. So in my grad school, I came across the term engineering from a very interesting course. So we were learning to uh, unravel and take a medical device apart. And the professor was asking, well, products, um, even though they do function, but we want to up level them, we want to upgrade them. Some of them are defective as well. And so, in what way that we can retransform products in order to make them better than the previous form that it was in? And that really got me thinking about our life in general, because engineering is really problem solving. And during these courses, I started to question, like, to be a good engineer, to be a good problem solver, we must first learn how to solve of our lives, right? Not just um, devices or chemical problems. Problems. What are the problems in our own lives that we need to solve first before we can actually contribute to the world? And so that how it came to me, the concept of re-engineering means construct my life in a different way, in a different form that is better than my old self. After I graduated from my grad school, I took a job as a clinical engineer at one of the biggest hospital in the US. And I realized how frustrated I was with my job. And I hated it. Like, my life was all about stress, a lot of anxiety going to work every day. Hospital environment is always very stressful. So to work in such a hassle environment and your job and very difficult bosses, is I was questioning, like, why did I have to put myself in that position? Why I was so unhappy? And so I needed to dig deeper myself and to understand what the problem is in order to resolve it. And that was when I realized I'm on the wrong path. And so by looking at everything um, in an engineering point of view, it's like, what is it in the old self of me that I need to let go of, and how can I reform myself, like, and what do I want me or this product to be, how it should function, a new form in a new structure. And that, I think that was the foundation for my book and everything that I of my own transition and my transformation, and how I left the US and reinvent myself into um, a different lifestyle, different career. Like everything is different for me, and that's how it led me here to be an author, be an influencer. And I have to say that since I reinvented myself, more authentic with who I am so much happier than I used to be with my life in the US, because it's no longer a materialistic pursuit, but more so about self growth and personal evolution, and finding my own authenticity and my own freedom and happiness from within. And that's how it led me to the spiritual path.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with that. It's really inspiring to see how much you've evolved in that time frame spiritually, and to ensure that whatever you're doing, you are comfortable with that, even though, you're working in an environment which would obviously give you a better salary, and stability in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how society sees stability. I was wondering, when you had this awakening that your scientific background and your spiritual growth are actually interconnected, and how ancient wisdom, science, and philosophy or spirituality, they sometimes feel as if they're separate realms when in fact they are
Mm-hmm.
interconnected. So, yeah, when did you have this awakening?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it was a very slow transition for me, because even though when I left the US, um, I was more into like personal growth, like how my life better, how can I live better and be the better person? How can I uh, find my life purpose and pursue my and all that? Like I didn't think any of that had anything to do with spirituality. I was very affect person, um, coming from my engineering background, right? I was very analytical and very person. But I remember that when I was in grad school, there's a lot of interesting research. Didn't give any concrete explanation of how things actually work that way. One example was when I was working on a medical device in my grad school, was going to give project idea to develop a pain management for TMJ. And it had to be a medical device because we didn't to develop um, any drugs that may cause addiction in patient. So when I was looking into different modalities for pain management, there's so many holistic approach to solving the problem of pain, like acupuncture, massage, laser therapy, heat and cold, temperature, um, or using electrode to interfere with your your pain neuron. So a lot of them did not have explanation how exactly these methods actually work. They could only obtain the result, but they couldn't give a very clear explanation, like how laser actually help to regenerate the cells and inhibit or reduce the level of pain. Same is with acupuncture. Even though we have like all this and we understand all the meridians, but in the core level of it, we couldn't understand how actually acupuncture works. So I realized that there's like a black, like a blank, the black space in science. There's a lot of things we still don't understand. A lot of things we still don't know. Recently did a very interesting experiment as well, which is about a year ago. Um, that I was doing this with. I don't know if you have heard of the water experiment from a very famous scientist, Japanese scientist. I think his name is Masuro Emoto. So he was conducting a pseudo experiment, right? So when he with water, I'm sorry. So when he talked to water in the very low, by giving it compliments, it gave a pretty nice patterns when he looked at it in the microscope. But when he talked negatively to the water, um, if the patterns was integrated, and it was not symmetry. So I thought that experiment was very interesting. I've heard many people repeat it, the experiment themselves at home, and I thought that was possible to do at home. So I did it also. So you can put either rice or whatever that you have. I had rice water. This is much easier to absorb that way. So you can put water and rice in a jar. It You can measure it however you want. Like nothing have to be very at the exact recipe, or there's no measurement. You just do like 2 jars of water and rice. So I actually use rice noodle. Uh, just do the same amount of water, same amount of rice, just like a duplicate. So one jar you label love, you label hate, or however that you want to do it. And then every day you would give compliments to the love jar and curse the other jar with bad words. I did that for several weeks. I think it's about 1 month or 2 months that we started to see a result. And it was very, very clear that, and you say it with feelings also. Sometimes you say it and you really mean, just imagine a jar like a person that you love or the person that you hate, right? Um, and then after a few weeks, I that the jar that you label love and the jar that label hate is completely different. Like the other one, and one is pretty fresh, and the other one is all molded. Um, you store everything in the same, right? Same measurement, same amount of water, everything put in exactly the same jar. And why does it produce different food? Wouldn't that be so interesting? So it says that our feelings and words really matter, and it ties into the ancient teaching and spirituality And this is the reason why prayer matters. This is why prayers actually work, because our positive vibration toward a person that to want to heal them heal. It was then that I started to realize spirituality and science actually different. Even in religion, even in Buddha's teaching, Hinduism, all these teaching in Christianity, they all say the same thing. We just don't have the science facts that can support all of these statements, but it doesn't mean that they woo-woo or work, because we don't have anything to measure it exactly what all these actually tell us. Um, there was another very interesting experiment. It's called Agrita experiment, and it's quite popular also. So what they do in this experiment is measuring. They wanted to see the uh, the behavior of light, whether it's behaving like particles or by waves. And in that experiment, they shoot the light into slate. So when they shoot it in just one single gap, the light particle. But when they shoot the light into two different gaps, then it behaves like waves. And they didn't understand why. Why is it that light behave like particles and also waves at the same time? So that's still the mystery. A lot of things we still don't understand, right? But when they put an observer, which is like a measurement, into the light to then instead in the double slit or the double gap, they started to behave like particles, not wave patterns. So by observing the light, it changes the trajectory and it changes the behaviors of the object. And that's what in meditation learn to observe ourselves and our life, because that's how we can control the reality. We want to create the realities when we can stay present to acknowledge our life and our behavior, how we actually create a certain realities. We have to observe that first in know. So even though um, a lot of things we do not have explanation, do not have the facts to support all of these statements, but we have the result. For me, ever since I started to do Reiki, is it an energy modalities? I realized that I didn't need to know all the facts or all the answer anymore, because mind boggling to me to actually feel the energy running through my body. And whenever I Reiki treatment, like I don't understand, but I could only feel all of this. Like why? Even though there have been some experiments that try to measure the energy of Reiki, and they could see the imaging, the light in different colors. But how does it help to heal the bodies? We still don't know. But there has been a lot of those from Reiki healings, a lot of people have been healed from it. And so sometimes at a certain, I just stop asking questions, and accept the fact that there's still so much I don't know. When I step into the realm of spirituality, it's like a whole new world to me. And I realized that everything that I know or I learned from school, um, about science that I learned from that work is so little compared to what I don't really know about, and to understand more about spirituality. It's like a whole zone of mystery. It's like a whole new world for me that I'm intrigued to explore, and learn more every day. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. There's still so much more to learn. Um, and there's so many different teachings. There's different healing modalities. There's so many paths to enlightenment, right? All of that is so very interesting to me, and I just cannot wait to explore. I cannot tell you exactly when I actually make that shift. I think it was just a very slow progress for me after I started to dig deeper into personal development, and I realized that spirituality is how it helps you to grow, because it's basically a tool for the soul evolution. So it ties very closely to personal development. So the more dig deeper into personal development, um, the more it led me into the path of spirituality, because I wanted to, um, reinvent myself, like I said, to be a better and better version of me.
Thank you so much for giving that insight. One of the things you picked up on that we do need to emphasize, at least within the scientific community, is accepting that we will not know everything. But if we can feel the sensations, as you mentioned, of the particular spiritual practice that we are comfortable in using, and I think that in itself is just so powerful, and to be able to focus on that emotional and sensational part of the experience is, I think, the first step to healing. In your book,
Mhm.
Living Through Alchemy, you talk about a particular pathway to healing, and that is alchemy, and how you can reinvent yourself, how you can be in tune with, your body's experiences, your material body, your spiritual body, your ancestral body. And thank you, first of all, so much for gifting me your book in a PDF format. I just found a lot of the content that you had written in that was really inspiring, and I think every single topic explored in that, we could have a separate conversation on that entirely.
Mhm.
But if you could, very briefly, because alchemy and the stages of alchemy that you've so beautifully described in the book, they are very thorough and deep. But if you could briefly give us an insight on how the stages of alchemy can align with our own personal growth and our spiritual journey, and how using this scientific sort of process can be a major way for us to actually see, visually and practically, that science and spirituality, they were always connected and they are the same, essentially.
Yeah. So I would say that re-engineering is within the concept of alchemy. Well, we learned the process of alchemy is like turning lead into gold, you know. With my chemical engineering, And like, yeah, I think that's was what intrigued me about alchemy, because it's closely related to science as well. Um, and I was curious, like how science could connect to spiritual wisdom, like alchemy. If we look at the concept of turning lead into gold, like um, transformation, a transmutation stages of our life, turning the heavy body to a lighter body. In re-engineering is to taking everything apart and reintegrate it into a different form. The same here with alchemy, but what it does, in order to take everything apart, it burns everything. It burns all the impurity, um, all the corruptible part of our body, which in this sense, in the conceptually, what it means is burning the negative beliefs and the indoctrination, everything that doesn't work in our lives. So alchemy works with the four elements of fire, water, and air in order to purify an object, or in this case, our energetic. So, uh, but alchemy has very specific stages. In the teaching, there are seven stages of alchemy, which is called the calcination, the first stage, that utilize the fire to transform things. It's been said that fire energy power to transform everything. And that's the reason why it's very easy for us to picture the metalwork. In metalwork, burns everything, like burned the lead and transform it into the gold. But there's specific stages that goes after well, and that would be the dissolution process, where everything soaks into the water. This is at the stage that we deeper into our subconscious to understand the emotional body, to understand the uh, inner child wounding, because all of us, since we're born, and how we raise, in some way, we carry these wounds in our childhood, and it's important for us to heal this of ourselves in order for us to grow. Then the next step is the separate, and the separation works with the air element. In you burn everything with fire and then soak it down to water to understand your emotional body. Now you have to separate the matters and work with it separately. And this is the part where we get to learn about learn about personal development, personal growth, in order to heal what we have realized in the previous. Then after that is the stage of conjunction. Conjunction is the stage where we reintegrate different parts, different metals together, um, how it interact with each other, and to further develop the form and purify the object or our behavior, um, to slowly perfecting it. So you have to re-interact with uh, different metal or different environment is what we normally run in this conjunction with our newer form. Now we're being put into a new environment. that environment, we will learn to project ourselves. Now we can see how we have healed. Else, we need to refine our healing or our inner self to purify it in the later stage. And that's why the stage after conjunction is fermentation. It's like perfecting a good wine, right? You have to let it steep and let it soak into the dark for a long period of time in order to have good taste. So it's the same here with our own transformation. When we go to that dark place, in order to see ourselves clearer, because it's a little bit harder now after function, the refining stage is a lot more delicate. So unless we get to sit and get to see ourselves in the dark, then we will understand how we can further improve. So that's why between the state of conjunction and fermentation, it's very easy to get stuck, because conjunction is quite. We think that we may have get to the finish line, but we're not, and there's still a lot on. So that's why the fermentation is very difficult to get through, because it requires you to put the internal fire energy to push forward. So if we get through with the fermentation, now we get distillation. It's kind of similar to like how you would make essential oil, right? It's very precious because you would have to distill everything. Like that essential part of ourselves is like the part of ourselves. So how we able to distill it further and remove all the little impurity in our body in order to obtain this essence, which is like the spirit essence ourselves, in order to help us to be lighter. Because when we are lighter, we have easier access to the spiritual realm, which is at the next stage, the last stage of the alchemy of coagulation. So this stage is often known as the philosopher's stone. This is where alchemists can actually transform everything into gold. So that's how we get into the concept of transforming a heavy metal into a precious metal, because the precious metal is the metaphorically is our purest essence, our spirit, because a much lighter metal as well. So how alchemy can help us to improve lives and our self evolution is first by giving us the awareness to have a different perspective about our life when we get to understand the characteristic of each stage, because every presents a challenge. So when we understand that at this stage I have to go through the fire, because that is what happening in the calcination, for instance, it's going to hurt, but because um, um, I know that because I have to go through these stages in order to um, go through the next level, to go through the next stage, then what is required of me in order to heal, and within myself that I need to heal. What tools do I need to support me to go through this stage. So it helped us to look at things in a high perspective, in order to in order to ask the right questions and address the problems that we're facing at the time. Now, if we understand that we are all, we, individual and also collective, we are all part of the alchemical process, because we are part of the universe. And the universe will always changing. So as we always grow, we will always change. So we will always cycle of alchemy. So by understanding that, we will no longer have the victim mentality, but rather the proactive approach to solving our life problems instead of getting stuck in, feeling poor or pity about ourselves, you know. But alchemy is very complex. At the same time, it can be pretty simple. It's complex in a way that it goes in layers. There's You don't just finish a cycle and then you're done, because the growing process is the universe is ever expanding. So you go through one cycle to the next cycle to the next cycle. And we have to go through many lives in order to evolve our soul. It's not one lifetime and then we're done. I think it was the Pythagoras that say that we approximately 800 lives have to go through 800 lives in order to evolve. There's no back statement to prove any of this, because he said that in order for a soul to grow, it takes approximately 800 years. So I would figure that maybe 8 to 9 lifetimes, right? Um, so that's what I was saying, that we are ever growing and expanding. So this cycle of alchemy, because it's part of nature, it will always be there. So when we try everything to go the way that we want to go instead of going with the flow of nature, and not going the flow of alchemy, we're basically going up the flow, going up, pushing against the grain. Then we're gonna tire ourselves out, gonna drive ourselves to the verge, because we're not. We have power, but we have limited powers compared to nature, right? And so that's the reason why when we are not aligned, we burnt out, because not on the flow. When we're on the flow, we can utilize the synchronicities, which kind of like the signal to tell we are aligned. Right? We can utilize these signs in order to help us succeed, to manifest what we actually want to achieve in our life. And everything is a lot easier. Things is more harmonious when we get to be on the flow, or we get to be online. And that's why when we understand alchemy, it helps us, not only to grow, but it helps us manifest things as well. And especially when we are more aligned, we will realize that our desire is the same as what he wants for us, or even more, or even better than our imagination, because our imagination is to our knowledge, to what we actually know, but it's unlimited to the universe. Um, so by understanding alchemy is helps us to obtain different help us to stay more alive. It helps us to let go of all the things that do not serve us, do not work for us, in order to make it easier for us to manifest the lives that we want in our life. So that's why I think it's pretty essential for for us and for the collective to give our audience another look to the ancient wisdom, because there's so much that we can learn there that really help us in this modern day, because we are so out of touch with our body, out of touch with ourselves. So by reintegrate these teachings, it helps us to be more alive and to be more authentic. And from there, we can find the freedom from within. We can find our authentic voice and our peace.
Yes. I liked how you mentioned how our ability to imagine and then to reimagine is often restricted in the current world. We can think in limitless ways, but we are often conditioned to do the opposite. And your nomadic lifestyle actually is one aspect of your lifestyle and essentially who you are, which goes against that restricted, sort of movement of our imagination and ourselves, our bodies, and the collective. And so we would love to really hear how traveling for you and seeing this vision of a borderless world, freedom that doesn't have borders, how that has really catalyzed your healing and becoming who you are. We'd love to hear that part of it because, like you said, alchemy has provided you that sort of framework to apply that sort of healing, into practice. But nomadism has also aided you quite a lot. So, yeah, it would just be amazing if you could give that insight to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's actually got me in not only understanding the concept of alchemy, because I was actually on the alchemical journey, and when I get to understand that, I was like, everything makes sense in my life, and the reason why I have that desire to be free ever since I was little. I always wanted to travel the world, to explore different cultures, get to meet different people, and get to see different beautiful stories. All of that are very exciting to me, feel most alive when I get to be on the road, when I get to travel. It's because I was following this enjoys, which is my passion to travel. That is how it led me here to where I am today. Back, back to my life when I was in the US, when I lost my job that I hate so much, I started to realize myself that what is it that I wanted to do right now, because I was a blank slate, because I already lost everything, because I lost the job in the US. I had to go home back in Vietnam with literally nothing. I didn't have anything. And so I asked myself, what is it that I really want to do? what does it feel in my heart? Like, what's the voice or what's the passion that I'm feeling right now? And the answer came to me with traveling. And I think it has always been there. But over the years, living in the US, chasing on the status and trying to make myself more valuable to employers, to the society, I had forgotten that dream to travel, to explore. I thought like maybe I should just, like everyone else, just settle in one place, just try to make more and more money and have a stable life, But obviously that didn't work for me, and it didn't work for me because I needed to be on this path, and so if I was trying to cling on to that materialistic that American dream to stabilize myself and obtain higher and higher status into the society, I wouldn't have the freedom that I have in order to travel and explore the world. So I had to let that go because I let the old vision of what it would be to obtain freedom in my in my own logical and analytical thinking. That's because to me was getting hard in the US was the path to freedom. But when I let that go, I actually obtained a sense of freedom from within that I did not even know this was what I needed. Um, because to me back then, green cards means like now I get a chance to be the first world citizen, so it'd be I didn't have to leave the US and I could switch employers. I don't like to work here. I could work for anyone, or I don't at all, and I could just work for myself, and maybe I could travel then. Um, so sometimes we can get so stuck in our mindset and not being flexible to what the universe have in store for us, and that's the reason why alchemy is it to happen, to push us to go on a different path. But you have to go with the flow, allow it to happen. It hurts because it doesn't work out the way that you want, but it's a lot better on the other side. Get to the other side. Um, it's just really difficult when you're in the middle stage at that blank slate because you don't know what happened when you let it go, and that's why we all so fearful, and that's why it's so hard to go through with that first stage of alchemy, and majority of us in the society struggle with that, and that's why you can see that in the collective we have so much fear, and this pandemic has shown us what is it in our shadow, in our society shadow, uh, because that's what we are facing now with discrimination, with all our decision making is very fear based driven, because we are all afraid of that unknown. We don't know what's going to happen because we are afraid of letting go the the idea or the vision that we have in the materialistic 3D thinking, 3D paradigm. So unless we let that go and completely embrace the unknown, because in the unknown is where we get the possibilities to create. Um, the possibilities to create depends on our own also, right? Whether we want it to be a positive experience or we want it to be a negative experience. Now it's all up to us to decide. So, but if we want our possibilities to have a better outcomes, then would need to obtain a higher perspective, a different ways of living. Otherwise, we're gonna reiterate same history, the same events are gonna happen from the past. So the reason why I needed to re-engineer my life to be different in order to create the different or better outcome for my life. That's why I decided to back to the corporate life after I left the US. I wanted to go on a completely different path. Different, I didn't know exactly how I wanted my life to be. It wasn't very clear for me. I only knew that I didn't want this, I didn't want that, and I only have the passion of traveling. So how going to work out? I didn't know what career I I would love to do, but because I use this passion compass to guide me, and I just keep asking. I know that I didn't want that anymore, but what's next is in me. So I, when I got into the van life, it gave me the opportunity to explore other interests of mine because I didn't have to work too much or full time. I still have to um, explore myself, which is my interest. What is it that I'm curious about? Then I would go and do that. So I would go and travel to any place I was curious about. I applied for. I was curious about like how do they make coffee. So I applied for a job to be a barista because I was curious about the coffee shop industry. And so over time, I get to understand that because I was following my interests, it was easy for me to do the work and I had fun with the job. However, I did completely fulfilled because I knew that I wanted to work for myself, even though these jobs was really fun. I was doing very well with it. I enjoyed it, all aspects of these jobs. There wasn't anything wrong. But but why didn't I feel complete? Why didn't I feel fulfilled inside? So when the pandemic happened, uh, we all have to be laid off temporarily. So I used that time to read myself, and I also asked a lot of questions like what do I want to do from here? Because having employment with companies with corporate life clearly is not very dependable. So how I make my career more sustainable and more reliable? Because I can only rely on myself. I knew came to Canada to start a van life because I wanted something different. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I hadn't to achieve that. So I was in Vancouver at that time, and I decided to let that career go. And I'm like, it's not going to help me to grow. And that's why I embraced to be a nomad. I fully embraced to, I said it is a nomad because lifestyle, you can also be stabilized in one place. You don't have to travel. So with nomadic van life, you move from places, and I wanted to fully embrace that, like fully embrace the the van lifestyle to um, the best way that it can offer me. Along the way, in the middle mountain scenes of the Rocky Mountains in Canada, I realized that was how I could achieve my freedom. And once again, I'm on the blank slate. So I realized that when I'm on the blank slate, sea of possibilities that's awaiting for me. So how can I use opportunities to create something new, to create something better? And synchronicities that happens, and they guide me to um, finally be an author, because I needed to write a book about my life experience. It just so happened understand the concept, the spiritual concept of alchemy at the same time I was writing the book. So that's how it came out to be. It has the spiritual and the esoteric influence. It's not just about my van life, but now it's about my whole growth journey and how van life and all this teaching really impacted me and helped me grow. If I get to truly understand the freedom from within and how letting go the things that even though I thought I was comfortable, but it didn't work for me. By all those things, it helped me to get here and be even more authentic to myself. Even though I lived my vein for 2.5 years back in Vancouver, working for corporate companies, I didn't really feel truly authentic. Didn't really understand why. But ever since I let all of these things go, I realized is my life path. This is who I am now. And everything is so much more aligned with the universe. Uh, and it's there's so many signs and synchronicity that happen to help me clearly see this is what I'm meant to do. And that's how I get to understand the whole pictures. With alchemy, it helps me to understand the whole picture of my life. Uh, I think Mark Twain said that is the two important days in your life, right? The day when you're born and the day you understand why. And when I understand alchemy, I understand life purpose and how it got me here, and how by letting go on the things that didn't serve helped me to be more aligned, helped me to see clear my life purpose. And because I have that desire to be free, so can I um, share the lessons that I learn with the world and help people to be free and to be more attentive to themselves. I think that is essentially and most importantly, at the time that we are in right now, that's what we need the most, because the world is getting more and more restricted because of COVID, because of the pandemic. So people suffer from anxiety and depression, right? And there's an escalation of mental health issues in the world, in the society as well. Um, because we being restricted from that, and it's because we already so lost touch of ourselves and who we are, and that's why we feel it, and we only react to what's going on in the world, and we don't know how to release ourselves in order to And that's why I needed to share my story. This is what I had to go through in order to find my own freedom from within. And so hopefully when the readers understand and understand my path in spiritual journey, it will help them to reflect, to uh, to start embark on their own journey and find their own freedom as well. Because only when they find their own freedom within, that is when the world can open up and be free, right? Because in Hermetic teaching, it says is so without. So if we want the freedom in the world, we have to obtain the freedom within ourselves first. And that's that's what I want the reader to get out of this book. And that's why in the book I include the journal prompt section as well to help them reflect on my story, their story, and help them to understand this spiritual and ancient wisdom, and hopefully get them to start digging deeper into spirituality, um, and and open uh, the and open themselves up to the world a little bit more and get to learn more about spirituality so they can heal and grow themselves as well.
Thank you so much, Vivi, for gifting us your time and your wisdom within this field of alchemy and nomadism. I think, as you mentioned, the biggest step to healing that anyone can take is to be open to possibility. And that is not just the first step to healing, but it's also the first step to reimagining a world that is free, that allows you to express yourself freely and to live freely. And so, this episode and this conversation, the wisdom you shared here, I really do hope that the listeners then give themselves that reflection time to see how they can live in a more liberated way, how they can practice that, and perhaps even use the pathway of alchemy or even nomadism to explore that part of freedom within themselves and then hopefully radiate that energy to the outer world. So, thank you once again for coming on this show and gifting us so much inspiration and motivation and a real starting point to how we can explore freedom within ourselves more in a better way.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
Hey, one more thing before you go. Don't forget to visit my website livingthroughalchemy.com to check out my book and download the first chapter for free. And if you have read the book already, don't forget to leave me the review on Amazon for good karma, and I would also love you for it. Thanks guys. Bye.